Public Media.
Hi, it's Tom Hudson, host of the Florida Roundup on Fridays at noon, and we have a special edition soon. We'll be live in Jacksonville on April 4th. We'd love to have you there. It's free and lunch is included. Information and register at wjct.org/events.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, can sleeping with a teddy bear help combat insomnia? We discuss the latest medical headlines and take your calls and questions in our monthly house call with Dr. Joe Sirven. Then we ask what it means to be poet laureate of the nation's oldest city and about a poem she wrote inspired by local history. And the creative mind behind the children's garden at the Jacksonville Arboretum comes to town to share his vision for the project. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org or tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. There are two special congressional elections today in Florida. NPR's Greg Allen reports Democrats hope to win the seats held by Republicans.
The two congressional seats in Florida's 1st and 6th districts were left vacant by Republicans who joined President Trump's administration. In the 1st district, Trump's original pick for Attorney General, Congressman Matt Gaetz, later withdrew and left Congress, leaving his seat open. The other open seat in the 6th district was held by Mike Waltz, who's now Trump's national security advisor. Democrats have contributed millions more than Republicans in both races. In the 6th district, two polls still show the Democratic candidate Josh Weil behind Republican Randy Fine, but his 3 or 4 point lag is within the margin of error. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami.
New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker has now been speaking on the floor of the U.S. Senate for the past 14 hours straight. It is not a filibuster. He has been helped by other Democrats. Booker says he is speaking to object to President Trump's agenda, citing numerous tariffs, the rejection of U.S. allies, and Trump's immigration policy. Booker says some deportees have been wrongly accused by the Trump administration of being criminals. He pointed to one case where an immigrant with protected status in the U.S. was deported in error.
Attorneys for several Venezuelan deportees have said that the Trump administration falsely labeled their clients as gang members because of their tattoos. But in Monday's court filing, attorneys for the government admitted that the Salvadorian man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was deported accidentally.
The Atlantic has reported on the man's story. In a court filing, Trump administration officials say even though it was their mistake to deport the man, there's nothing they can do now because he is in El Salvador. The military-run government in Myanmar has increased the death toll from last Friday's earthquake. It has now surpassed 2,700 people, and thousands of others are injured. Michael Sullivan reports from neighboring Thailand. The Myanmar military leader says the death toll is expected to rise.
Myanmar's Senior General Min Aung Hlaing made the announcement on state-run television, but experts believe the final casualty toll will be much higher. Aid workers in the hardest-hit areas, especially in and around Myanmar's second city, Mandalay, 10 miles from the earthquake's epicenter, say there's an urgent need for shelter, food, and clean water. Rescue efforts are continuing, even though time is running out to find survivors buried under the rubble. Efforts to get relief supplies to survivors are being challenged by damaged infrastructure and poor communications, and by the ongoing civil war between Myanmar's military rulers and rebel groups. For NPR News, I'm Michael Sullivan in Chiang Rai.
The earthquake killed at least 20 people in Thailand. This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is asking the public what it thinks about proposed changes to shrimp harvesting rules in Nassau and Duval counties. WJCT News 89.9's Michelle Coram has more.
FWC proposes increasing the amount of live bait commercial shrimpers are allowed to harvest from 1 to 5 gallons. That would put the region in line with the rest of the state. They also propose opening part of the Pumpkin Hill Creek Preserve to allow both recreational and commercial shrimping from September through December. If approved, this would be the first time in more than 3 decades that shrimping is permitted along Pumpkin Hill Creek between the Nassau River and Tiger Point. The Jacksonville City Council this month passed a resolution opposing the proposal. FWC has scheduled a public workshop Wednesday evening to explain the proposed rule changes and get people's opinions before making a final decision in May. Michelle Coram, WJCT News, 89.9.
The workshop starts at 6 Wednesday night at the Mayport Community Center across from the St. Johns River Ferry. We got a dense fog advisory in place until 10 this morning for western Duval, western Nassau, and all of Baker County this morning. That dense fog advisory extends into areas of southeast Georgia as well. Eventually, we're going to have sunny skies this afternoon with highs in the mid-80s. We do have a slight chance for rain tonight with lows eventually getting down into the upper 60s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Total Wine & More, for discovering something new, like a Cabernet or single-barrel bourbon. Learn more at TotalWine.com. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Available to adults 21 or older.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the soothing power of stuffed animals and why the government has turned to a discredited vaccine researcher to lead its autism study. We talk about the latest medical headlines during our monthly house call with Dr. Joe. Later, it's a list that includes poets from Wordsworth to Tennyson to Billy Collins and Kay Ryan. We ask St. Augustine's own poet laureate what it means to be the honorary voice of the community. But first, we are joined, as we are each month, by Mayo Clinic neurologist and host of WJCT's Saturday program, What's Health Got to Do with It? Dr. Joe Sirven. Thanks for being here.
Oh, and happy April Fool's Day.
Happy April Fool's Day. We are celebrating without, I don't think I've gotten jinxed yet. Have you?
I have not yet, but the day's early. Right?
The day is young, and I'm sure my producer's got something in store. Anyway, happy April Fool's Day. I want to start, if we can, with a story that you brought to my attention about the link between healthcare and climate change. It's a really unusual topic. A lot of people, I don't think, have heard of that before.
So this is, to be honest with you, as someone in healthcare, I didn't really think about this that often. We often so focus on energy industries like oil and gas and things of that sort, and have not considered healthcare's footprint on climate change. And the percentage to what at least it's estimated is pretty high, almost 8% of climate change concerns with regards to gas emissions, things of that sort, come from healthcare institutions. And if you think about it, it's interesting because healthcare has a lot of trash that occurs with it, not just the single use of a mask or some type of thing that you have to switch for each and every patient. The biggest part of the hospital that is involved in that climate change tends to be the OR surgical environment, because there's so much that you have to kind of have single-use items for. And as a result, with that, coupled with the gases that you use for anesthesia, plus because these are bio type of products that are produced, you have to incinerate the trash or find other ways to get rid of it just to make sure that it's safe out in the community. So this is one of those areas that I don't think we've talked a lot about what healthcare, particularly healthcare institutions, need to do to basically curb our use of products, if you will, to help climate, if you will.
It's interesting. I think anybody who's had someone in the hospital recently, they kind of noticed just the enormous amount of plastics, the enormous amount of things that are used and thrown and used and thrown. Even if there's anything left over that wasn't used, it gets thrown away because they can't be, reused or put into somebody else's room. But one thing that was interesting in this study was that there are some settings where they were saying it's not necessary to, for instance, use gloves. They said that there's about a patient is is associated with 100 gloves a day, basically, while they're in care, 100 sets of latex gloves. But that there's some post-operative situations where they're saying you don't even really need to wear gloves. People could just make do by just washing their hands.
And so this is where I think it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities to improve. One of the things that we see is that during COVID, it went from necessarily having to wash your hands all the time to using some type of alcohol sanitizer, which will, pretty much dissolve on skin and things of that sort. And that can, in essence, almost save water if you find that to be in the appropriate settings as the thing to do. But there are so many other things that, maybe new products or new approaches that we probably need to begin focusing on just to help in this regard.
The surgical gases you kind of mentioned,
Yes.
but I was really shocked to learn that there are a couple of them, including nitrous oxide, which are terrible greenhouse gases. They really are some of the most polluting. And so, what can be done? I mean, if you're in surgery, right? You need some sort of anesthetic.
Correct, but there are choices of anesthetics, and so that's where the innovation can arise. I think when I looked at the study that came out with this, I took it as like more of a hallmark of like, hey, do we think about this? This is something that really can kind of be something should be done about it to kind of get us to a better place for innovation. And so I think it's a call for innovation to really improve that type of footprint that we all leave. But it's now made me think about when I'm in the hospital, I'm like, oh wow, we really should be trying to be much more proactive in that regard. And I think they're trying to be as well.
Yeah, it did sound like that a lot of surgeons would be willing to change their
Yes.
practices, but most really didn't know how. And one of the ways that they suggested is separating true biohazardous material
Correct.
from things that are not necessarily needing that same treatment, because a lot of biohazardous material is incinerated, including plastics.
Right. And that's the issue. What is the other approach that we can take with this? Most of us, certainly in the medical side, I have not been necessarily educated in terms of how to do eco-friendly versions of things. And healthcare administrators, I hope that they are more trained in this regard because they're the ones kind of running that type of approach. But this is a call to action and one that we should all be paying attention to because hospitals carry all of these items and they're not a minor contributor.
Yeah, significant. Another headline from the last couple weeks is a study that came out, an article that came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, saying that people need to start looking out for what they call predatory publishers. What are those?
So this is one that even got my attention as I saw this. Predatory journals are basically journals that a medical author can literally pay money towards, and that journal will just put anything out there on their platform. It's a way for these groups to make money. It doesn't even do peer review in some instances, and they will just take whoever wants to publish their money to put that in there. The problem that emerges with that, especially in the world of journalism and things of that sort, they go, well, according to a medical study published in Journal X. Well, if it's not a journal that you recognize and it's just some title, you could literally cite anything if you can publish anything. And that has become a surprising new issue in terms of almost a way of getting misinformation out there with with all the walls and fortresses of peer review, if you will, not peer review of getting it published. And that's what's kind of been concerning.
Explain to us why there is urgency on the part of physicians and researchers to get things published.
There's two ways. In order to establish scientific knowledge, it needs to be published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. And that's always been literally the keys to getting from an idea to a new scientific fact, a clinical trial, a new therapy, a new diagnosis, or a terrible side effect or new problem. So that is one way. I mean, that's the whole medical profession. Its underpinning is based on all of these published pieces, if you will. It's also how you get promoted in academic medicine, how you get to play things like tenure or elevate in the ranks of academic medicine. So the more you published, especially in more prestigious journals, the more likely that you're able to obtain those ranks. So there's always, especially if you're in the area of research or in academic medicine, publishing is the keys to a lot of things, scientific fact, but also personally to move up in the world of academic medicine. So there's always this zeal, if you will, to get things published no matter what.
And these specious journals now are branching out even into fake or so-called predatory conferences where they're doing a lot of advertising to get physicians to go to them. They're at these luxurious locations. The content is sort of ambiguous. There, again, no peer reviews on the stuff that's being covered. So who's profiting from that financially, and kind of who's benefiting just more big picture from these kinds of conferences?
So are these kind of almost companies that are kind of putting these things out there, and they will basically take the money. It's almost like a scam, and publish these things out there, put it on any platform, which you can do digitally. You don't even have to print, and they take the money. So there is these groups that go out there and do this. I myself, I will never forget. I saw a note. So and so is speaking at a conference in Switzerland, and there was my name on it. And I said, well, I don't remember getting a trip to Zurich or anything along those lines. That sounds lovely. And then I called, and I had to kind of actually get my institution involved to get my name taken off of it. I mean, they just literally put your name out. And I had no idea who these people were, and they were in another country.
Are these people, though, doing it just for a money-making effort, or are they trying to seed, bad science?
It's a little bit of both, but I think that the main driver for this is money. It's a way you can make this a cash cow, especially when you see how many people want to publish, not only in the United States, but internationally. It's the same story, so that they will try to make this global and try to collect as much money as they can. Perhaps bad science, but I think it's more the money driver at this moment.
So how are people supposed to discern? I mean, JAMA wrote this story, but they didn't name names. They didn't say these are the bad science journals that you should disregard.
So the bottom line is you have to look at this, when you get a piece of information and it says from an X journal, look up the journal, see where they belong to. Do they have an impact factor? That is often the marker of a peer-reviewed journal. That's the type of thing that gets monitored in the National Library of Medicine. Is it something that other scientists are there? That's, I'd say, the first step. You have to do that extra due diligence, if you will.
And impact factor basically meaning how often it's cited by other.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
The higher the impact factor, the more prestigious it's likely to be.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven. He is a Mayo neurologist. He's the host of our WJCT program, What's Health Got to Do with It? And he is here to answer your questions about healthcare or medicine, or if you just need some advice, he's here. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I want to move to a topic sort of not unrelated in terms of, studies, how reliable they are. There is a man named David Geyer. Yeah. He has no medical degree. He is fairly discredited. He's been disciplined for practicing medicine without a license in Maryland. He's been chosen to lead the government's autism vaccine study. He is somebody that has repeated debunked claims linking vaccines to autism. First of all, how surprising is it, the fact that he's been chosen of all people to lead a study like this?
It's very surprising. This is someone, this is a father-son team. So that the David is a geneticist, at least per his own listing. The father is a physician. They both, out of their basement in Maryland, had looked at autism and done research. They had lost, I think the father lost his license because of issues with regards to using unvalidated treatments for autism. And to have someone like that be now a senior data analyst for a major government agency in charge of this topic, I'm not sure how to even begin to respond, but let's just say it's concerning.
I want to dig just a little deeper into that because you talk about the research that he did with his father. There was a lab that they ran basically
Yes.
out of the dad's basement. It was a wood paneled, wall to wall carpeted room that he said was a world class lab where they did their research. And they were giving injections of Lupron to kids that may or may not have correct diagnoses of autism. And they did so under the guise that they were um, perhaps suffering from precocious puberty.
See, this is the type of thing that gets you so concerned because things like that, where you are giving kids hormone type of treatment, you have to have that done under close FDA supervision, a clinical trial, looking at side effects. It has to be done with all the safety levers around it. To do that, it's almost preying on people who are vulnerable, and that is just a terrible place for anything to be. It just breaks my heart. Conditions like autism and others often get a lot of folks to do certain type of treatment options that are unproven. Something like that, where you're doing injections, that there's a real risk of harm to people, and that's just wrong.
Some of the reporting on Geyer has also talked about the kind of research that he's done. And I think it's worth pointing out because there are studies that have been debunked that have linked vaccines to higher rates of autism. Their study found that, and the reason that it was ultimately debunked was that they were saying that kids with more vaccines appeared to have higher, risk of autism or rates of autism. But in fact, it was, what the science showed was that they were looking at kids who were older
Right.
and had more vaccines. And kids who have autism are typically diagnosed when they're a little older, closer to age 5, for instance, than age 2. So they would accumulate vaccinations over that time, but it wasn't necessarily a causation.
And that is where you run into like huge problems when you do not account for all of the variables with relationships when you're looking between two things, whether they are connected or not. In that particular study, they did not account for age. And age is huge because in kids, at certain points, you can see the development of a certain condition, regardless of whether you're vaccinating or not vaccinating. So you may just be simply seeing that at age 5, that's when the problem is likely to occur, versus that's also happens to be the same time you get vaccinated. So if you don't account for age, you can come up with any type of specious type of connection without any point to it. And that's why you need professionals and folks that are very trusting, that understand the kind of all the variables that are out there in order to make good conclusions. Otherwise, you can conclude anything you want without accounting for things, and all you end up with is bad science.
So that kind of dovetails with another topic, which is measles, the
dear, yeah.
ongoing measles outbreak. As of the 28th, which I think is the last day that we had some good data, there are 483 measles cases in 20 states. That is more than in all of 2024. It still sounds like, kind of a small number to people who are used to, you know, hundreds of thousands of COVID diagnoses. So can you explain why it would be concerning that there's fewer than 500 measles diagnoses?
So it gets us back to how infectious a person with measles is in terms of spreading it to others. So for every person with measles, it has the potential to spread it to 18 other people. So you take those 500 and then you now do almost a logarithmic multiplication for 18 for each of those people, and each of those people 18.
How does that compare to something like COVID that we consider so contagious?
COVID was closer to 2 people per individual
Oh.
versus to 18. Measles is the most contagious virus that is known to humankind, period, at least until something else comes out. But measles is that contagious. And so when you have an outbreak with that number of people, it can easily go viral, pun intended, throughout the U.S. And mind you, in one of those cases in the D.C. area, one of the measles cases, the person was riding Amtrak. Another one was in Dulles Airport.
Oh, wow.
It does not take much to get that to spread to a lot of other people.
And, measles can be uncomfortable. It can be dangerous, especially for children, but it can also cause some really long-term impacts, neurological kind of impacts. I mean, talk a little bit about that because we're mostly focused right now on the here and now.
Right. So what can occur is that in some cases, and it's a small number, so I'll give you that, there can be literally what's called an encephalitis. That is an infection of the brain. And as a result, it can leave a mark, especially in a young child where they're developmentally delayed as a result, because you have literally a brain infection that occurs with this. This can have huge impact for learning growth in the future. And although it is not common, why should someone be subjected to that? Because ultimately it is so preventable. That's the part here that I really feel the passion for. This is preventable. We do not need to be doing this because this is occurring in unvaccinated folks.
A report this week that really surprised some, ProPublica did an investigation that found that the Centers for Disease Control had ordered its staff this week not to release an expert assessment about the risk of catching measles. It found that obviously it was highest in the areas where vaccination rates were lagging, and it would have emphasized the importance of getting vaccines. And this agency, again, helmed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a powerful voice in the anti-vax movement. What does it suggest about the state of the CDC that they're pulling back on messaging about vaccines?
It's concerning, is probably the easiest way to describe that, because we turn to the CDC to get our latest medical facts through their various programs and all that they collect the data from. When you're getting kind of a mixed message, that starts to say, will I be able to trust this over time? And that I think would be the worst outcome from all of this. But it just makes you just wary suddenly that you have to double check everything that you're reading, if you will, especially if it's coming from certain agencies. So far, they're still putting out materials that everyone is in agreement with, but it just makes you kind of concerned as to what the future may look like.
If they're pulling back on releasing information.
Correct.
We know that the administration is planning to cut about 2,100 jobs from the CDC. But, you talk about trusting the information from the CDC website. Another bit of related, RFK information this week was that his nonprofit anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense, actually created a fake CDC page. They posted a page that mimicked the official site in every respect, typeface and logos and layout, except that it offered a suggestion that vaccines cause autism.
Again, this is one of those areas that just gets you just so angry and frustrated because you're hurting people in that regard. Fortunately, that was taken down, and all that means is that we all have to be very vigilant in this regard. Vaccines are still a good thing.
Yeah. We're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven about the week's headlines and, well, really kind of the month's headlines in medical news. And we are taking your calls and questions. If you have either, you can call us, 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Related to the measles issue, the question of vitamin A and taking vitamin A as a treatment or a prophylactic of some kind, that's something that, again, has been advocated by the head of HHS, the Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is something, though, that has resulted in some unintended consequences. Tell us what's happening with vitamin A.
So vitamin A, in some cases of measles, when you are vitamin A deficient, which would more likely happen when you are living in a country outside the U.S., it can be actually helpful in terms of recovery because it'll help the immune system and things of that sort. So I know that they've latched on, especially in kids when they're in the hospital and in the throes of measles. Some have given vitamin A, and so that's not a wrong thing to do. However, to say that vitamin A is going to stop the measles is wrong. It's you still have to deal with the prevention. That's still the way to avoid this. The thing about vitamin A is that it isn't just like, people always think of vitamin and think of your Flintstones and you take it and it's going to be fine and all that stuff. There is toxicity associated with some vitamins. It can cause problems with vision or other type of symptoms, and you can become vitamin A toxic. And that is a real thing. So ultimately, that is one of the issues is that when people who have measles start taking vitamin A willy-nilly, if you're deficient, of course, that's a good idea. But our diets actually are pretty good in terms of maintaining it. And we are not known to be vitamin A deficient in the U.S. But that is something that is done in some measles cases for those who have that trouble.
And so they're actually seeing some patients that are exhibiting some of the signs of vitamin A toxicity. What are those signs?
And so typically you'll have some visual problems. There can be anemia. When you look at the blood count, you look at the liver enzymes. You may find some of these things on laboratory testing that you may not always exhibit it easily, but it's there, and it's something that has to be monitored carefully because you do not want to run into a very serious issue. This is not a minor point to be toxic.
So if you're concerned about, contracting measles, perhaps you are unvaccinated or you don't recall if you've been vaccinated or when the last time you were vaccinated, what would you recommend on vitamin A?
I would say unless you are truly deficient, talk to your primary care doctor, talk to your provider. They know what to tell you. That's who you have the relationship with. They will, if you need the vaccine, they can get it for you. If you're not sure, they can even run a titer, which is to see if you've had enough antibodies in you if you're exposed. That's the type of thing that you really need to sit there with your physician and your provider and sort through that. But I would say I'd hold off on the vitamin A right now.
Yeah. We've got a question from Susan on Facebook. She says, recently somebody was on the show talking about suing doctors who were negligent. I'm about to get a colonoscopy, and they want me to sign a release form acknowledging that I know something can go wrong. What is your opinion on those forms? Why don't doctors lose their license when they are sued for negligence and lose?
Well, so here's, I can answer part of that question, Susan. So that's a very good point. I will say that in any type of procedure, people need to know the risks and the benefits. And part of that type of writing that out is a way to say you're aware of the risks, those were explained to you, and that you're okay to proceed with it. If someone is negligent, like they literally did something purposefully wrong or it was just wrong, that should be decided by a court or some arbitration to figure that out. On the other hand, if it was just a complication, well, nothing is zero risk in medicine or in life for that matter. So in that regard, that kind of helps to protect the other person, because there are folks that will immediately on any type of problem sue a physician. I'm not saying that they shouldn't in every case, but I'm just saying that it's to protect both sides in that regard. So to me, when I hear about that form, it's just a way to just have a rethink the decision about what's the risk, what's the benefit here.
I do want to talk about a piece of good news
I
this
love
week because
that.
I feel like we've been sort of hitting some of the harder headlines. This is about the power of teddy bears. Tell us what we're learning about stuffed animals and what benefits they can offer.
I love this. This was a story that was put out by the folks at CNN, and they looked at how the number of plush toy sales at places like Build-A-Bear have increased significantly since COVID. There were 2 points about this. Number one is that in 20% of those sales are going to adults, people who don't have kids, which is telling you something about the stuffed animals, that people are kind of gravitating to it. From a psychological standpoint, there's 2 elements that's going on here. People look at stuffed animals as nostalgia, and it's comfort. It's a way of just self-soothing. And one of the things I loved about the piece was the fact that even from an evolutionary standpoint, we all like to be cuddled or kind of placed in a situation where when you're holding on to the stuffed animal, it just makes you feel better about life, or more protected. And it helps people sleep a little better, and it helps their just whole mental well-being.
Extraordinary. And they're actually selling, I guess, some weighted stuffed animals now that kind of, I guess are extra cuddleable.
Let's just say that I'm not going to admit to anything on air about my sleeping habits, but they're not a bad thing to do on occasion right there.
There are always a lot of, teddy bears at the hospital. People.
One of the things I've always noticed is that when I'm in a hospital environment, and I get this, and it didn't hit me till I read this story, is how many people have their own blanket with them, typically an NFL team or a baseball team, or they bring their favorite pillow or a stuffed animal in some cases. And I'm not a pediatrician, so I'm telling you the age of the people that I'm seeing that were carrying this. But I get it. When you're in the midst of some sort of life-changing therapy, why not bring a little bit of home or your past with you, and it makes you feel better.
Grab a teddy bear. Well, Dr. Joe, you're here today, in fact, this morning, because you are going to be here this afternoon. You are hosting a Lunch and Learn event at WJCT Studios. And we're also joined now by David Luckin, who is our executive producer, host of Electro Lounge, all-around station guru.
All that silly stuff.
What is going on here? Usually the Lunch and Learns are kind of like an educational thing where people get a nice lunch, they get to learn about some sort of medical news or research.
Right.
But this is a little bit different. Where are you going with this?
We thought we'd just bring people in, and like you said, often we have the disease of the month and we learn about it and try and avoid it. And we thought for April Fools we would do a lunch and laugh, and we'll forget all the sickness, and we will realize how important laughter is as medicine. So Dr. Joe is going to do a short open, and all you folks at home, you've got time. We're going to start at 11:30, so get in your car, come on down. We're going to show a film. It's one of the most famous screwball comedies ever. We can't mention the name for contractual reasons, but believe me, it's really funny. You will laugh a lot. You will feel good when you come down and see this film, and Joe will set it up for us.
Laughter is truly the best medicine, and the best thing I can tell you is that this is unlimited refills and no copay. So it's all good.
There you go.
This
and you will laugh.
It's a screwball comedy. Are you able to give us any clues about either the era?
It's probably the most famous one. It came out in 1938, and there was a movie made years later just like it, which we can't mention either. Just come on down. Trust us.
Yeah.
All the films we're showing, you can trust us, even if you don't know what they are. This is all part of film at WJCT Studios. We just kind of mashed it up with a little Lunch and Learn for April Fool's Day and give everyone a little break from the serious. And
we've been trying to do
laugh.
the films in part to pick up the absence created by the loss of Sun Ra and Peter Jackson. So this is
it's another exactly. A matinee, which is kind of nice.
Exactly.
And we'll show a classic.
People do need to sign up though, right? I mean, just to get a lunch on the
WJCT.org/events. It's $5. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that for this one. Usually Lunch and Learn is free, but since we're showing a film and it actually cost us money, so $5. Come on down. You're going to laugh. It's going to be the best thing you do all day.
All right. Well, it can't go wrong if you've got David Luckin and Dr. Joe Sirven involved.
We are looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much for being here, you guys. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Up next, keeping St. Augustine's cultural heritage alive, one verse at a time. Welcome back. Well, poet Anne Browning Masters knows a good story, and now it's officially her job to tell the city of St. Augustine. She is the sophomore poet laureate of St. Augustine, and she joins me now. Anne Browning Masters, thanks for being here.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
We're also joined by Melissa Whistle. She is communications director for the city of St. Augustine. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Anne.
So, Anne, thanks for being here. Congratulations, first of all. What is the job of being a poet laureate, and how did you decide that that was something that appealed to you?
In this case, I'm asked to participate at certain city events and provide a poem for the occasion.
Okay.
Okay.
And so is that at every occasion? Are you writing poems? Are you reciting poems? Tell us a little bit about the scope of the job.
There's a calendar of events, but it's not every month all the time. So, for example, Arbor Day, the opening of a new city park. We have something we'll do for Poetry Month in about a week. And sometimes I write a poem for the occasion. Sometimes I have a poem that's already appropriate for the occasion. And there will be times when there are poems that are also appropriate that aren't mine that I might read.
Describe your poetry for people who are not familiar with it.
Okay. I write about two groups of people as a subgroup in St. Augustine, the Floridanos and the Menorcans. The Floridanos are the descendants of the first Spanish settlers who came in 1565, and the Menorcans are a group of indentured servants who came in 1768 to Florida, and then ultimately St. Augustine in 1777. And I write about their story, and they're a subgroup of population in St. Augustine who are still with us. I am a Floridana, and I am also a Menorcan.
I was going to say Masters is a name a lot of people will know from around about St. Augustine. And is Browning another one? Or
No.
Masters is the Menorcan?
Masters is the my husband's Menorcan name.
Mm-hmm.
And it was anglicized from mestre, maestre, de mestre, as my husband says, whatever the priest wrote that day in the baptismal record, over time, obviously. His family names are pretty much Ponce and Masters and Andrew, or as we would say, Andreu at one time. Mine are Pellicer, Rogero, Pomar, on and on and on, including the Greek and the Italian family names of Pacetti and Mapramati and Circopoli.
Wow. Yeah, all big names around St. Augustine. And so did you come to the poetry first or the history first?
I came to wanting to save the story because I write about common people. So it is a history for them, but I also see what I call the raw beauty in their lives that I wanted to save. And to me, that's poetry.
So Melissa Whistle, explain to us what the genesis was of like having a poet laureate for the city of St. Augustine. I mean, I think we think of people like Bob Pinsky, the national poet laureate, but I don't know of many cities, or maybe this is the only one.
I don't know. Great question. I don't have that answer. It was recommended through, very candidly, my predecessor, who is a great writer as well, but made a recommendation to our commission after he had retired, sent an email, and was sort of, speculating on the idea of the city needs a poet laureate. And at the time, Vice Mayor Roxanne Horvath, she as our commissioner elected was sort of one of our representatives that was more in tune with arts, architecture, sort of the arts and culture aspect of things. So she kind of took that idea from Paul Williamson and said, I think that's a great idea. So we came up with a resolution, and it really falls into what it falls under is our strategic plan for arts education and community and outreach. So it was a really good fit to bring into the program. And then once the program was established, it was established to be administered through the communications department.
And so this is a volunteer position. It's an unpaid position.
Correct.
It's a year?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
And so how do you solicit for a poet laureate, and how do you ultimately choose one?
The poet laureate is advertised as an application. And so anyone in the community can apply. Let me rephrase that. I'm not sure. You might have to be a resident. I don't know the exact criteria, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But every 2 years, that application to apply is put out there into the universe, and we get applications, and then the commission votes People can write letters of recommendation or letters of endorsement to the commissioners, suggesting someone that they know has applied, and they do a ballot and they vote and they select our poet laureate.
And is there any obligation that they be writing about things that have relevance in St. Augustine as Anne's poems do?
I think it's just that they are tasked to write poetry, and then part of my job in reviewing the poetry is just to run through it and make sure that it's appropriate. We've never rejected anything. So,
And you have brought a poem, and I don't know if this is the one that you're going to be reading at the upcoming event. It's called Elegy for the Children of Henry and Agnes Sanchez. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of what this poem means, and then maybe read it for us?
Yes. This poem is, I guess, elegiac, as is in the title, looking back at a founding family in St. Augustine, and in this case, it's a Floridano family that moved west. They live outside of St. Augustine, and it reflects on them as well as that common tie in many southern towns of the church fair, and how people reminisce at the church fair and remember people who have gone on. And in the case of these folks, they remember people who life was pretty hard. It was pretty basic out in the country. And so they are remembering them and realizing that it was a pretty big deal what they did.
And so, who is the narrator in this poem, and what are they remembering? Who's speaking in the poem?
It's
The
an
voice
external
of-
it's an external narrator. It's not any of the folks in the poem.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's have a read.
Okay. Because each poem of this nature that I write is about a specific time, a specific place, and patterns and practices that people had, I have to always do a little bit of context, or else sometimes you won't know what in the world I'm talking about. So I like to, in this case, there are 2 food items and 2 people I need to quickly tell you about so you'll know the context of why are they in this poem. The first is purlo, which is a rice dish that is known to Menorcans and many people in St. Augustine. It's what we call a poor man's paella with just one protein source. The second is gopher stew, and I have to explain that a gopher in the Southeast is a land tortoise that was made into stew and was so popular now it is on the endangered species list, and you may no longer legally eat gopher stew.
All right. And I'm just going to say before you get
Sure.
going, we've got about 2.5 minutes. This is Anne Browning Masters, Melissa Whistle joining us, and I'm just going to let you read and get as far as we can.
Okay. 2 people. Preacher Triai was not a preacher. That was his nickname. And Father Langley, the church priest, was a teetotaler that men hid their beer from. This is the elegy for the children of Henry and Agnes Sanchez. Afraid to leave the graveyard, where a little less history waits outside, we tell stories by stones named for us. The lap of St. Ambrose Cemetery shifts to hold another pioneer child come home. The fair brings them back, spring blinking away a quarter second of funeral time. Preacher Triai thumps his ladle, yells, "Go for stew!" A backbone of women pile, heap, mound, purlo. New-blooded maidens swipe their rags full to impudence, sweeping away our crumbs. Outside, men step a beer-hiding shuffle. Father Langlade's forgotten choreography slides on. The quick and the dead catch hands on the oak path from cemetery to church hall on fair day. Hattie's laughter moves through new babies and arches in the canopy of a Spanish moss lane. Charlie watches great-grands flay the go-fish pond, naming their names, until the quiet one feels the love of his breath and smiles into the pulling shadow, knowing from the light that falls between trees whose children will next play on bare cedar roots. We have got shut their faith, yet fret after the pole stars who loved us. hanging back for an hour of cracker comfort to ease the gate click. We make epic, common folk uncommonly determined to burn.
DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org.
Hi, it's Tom Hudson, host of the Florida Roundup on Fridays at noon, and we have a special edition soon. We'll be live in Jacksonville on April 4th. We'd love to have you there. It's free and lunch is included. Information and register at wjct.org/events.
On the next Fresh Air, Pulitzer Prize-winning critic Hilton Als joins us to discuss his latest exhibition, which challenges the way we see art, identity, and storytelling. He's been a staff writer at The New Yorker for over 30 years, writing theater reviews, essays, and profiles of figures like Toni Morrison, Richard Pryor, and Prince. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
They used to work in now-shuttered regional Social Security offices or protecting our national parks or on nuclear security. President Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge fired them and thousands more. We'll hear from a roundtable of American federal workers.
I've had to completely uproot my life and make career-altering decisions in about the course of a week.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the big plans are sprouting at the Jacksonville Arboretum and Botanical Gardens, a big event that is going to unveil some plans coming in the works for a children's garden. Here to tell us about it, Dana Doody, Executive Director, and Lindsay Starner, President of the Jacksonville Arboretum and Botanical Gardens. Welcome both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So let's start, if we can, with the history of this arboretum. Lindsay, this is something we were just talking about. I kind of remember when it was at its earliest days, but how has it grown? How did this arboretum come about in the first place?
Sure. So back around the 2003, 2004 area, there was a group, neighborhood group that wanted to create an arboretum somewhere in Jacksonville and came to the city. At the time, the area was owned by JEA and the city, and so there was a collaboration between those two groups to designate the now about 130 acres of land to become an arboretum. So it is leased currently by from the Jacksonville Arboretum through the city of Jacksonville. So we do have a good partnership with them. However, it is a little different than just a normal park and does not get the same money and whatnot as other parks do. So we have continued what the original Arboretum board started back in 2008, and we're growing. We're growing faster than we ever have before. Our memberships and our visitors have just more than doubled and tripled over the past couple of years. So we're here to talk about how we're growing with the community.
And so you do depend on fundraising. I know that you've got kind of a gala event coming up to do some additional fundraising. But Dana, there's a speaker at that event that has a hand in the ongoing development of the Arboretum. Tell us who he is and what he's going to be talking about.
His name is Trey Fromey. He is a designer that the board went on a process to select. So we went through American Public Gardens and we're very diligent about finding the right firm to work with on creating our master plan for the Arboretum. And Trey Fromey is with, he has his own company, 3 Fromey Designs, but he has designed gardens all over the country. Like he was the master garden plan for, he was involved in the master garden plan for Atlanta Botanical Gardens. He just finished the Grand Garden for Morton Arboretum, which is truly beautiful. So we knew we were in really good company with Trey, in really good hands. And he has started our master plan, and the board selected as one of the first projects within the master plan to be the children's garden. And so we will be talking about that on, we have our event on Thursday evening here at WJCT, and it's called Seeding Jacksonville. So, and Trey is our presenter.
And so among the things that will be discussed at that event, you're going to show some renderings of the children's garden. Is that right?
Yes, we're going to show some really gorgeous art that Trey has created to be able to to translate the concepts that we've worked with the board in selecting different concepts that will be within the children's garden. And so he's going to highlight a few of the sculpture art and some of the elements that the board has selected to be in the children's garden.
And Lindsay, what are the kind of ideas, the goals of the children's garden? Like, what are the elements that were considered most foundational and essential?
Sure. So the goals fit really well with our mission and vision at the Arboretum. It's to spark wonder, to also keep the resiliency around the fact that there are natural trees there, but we also have gardens. And so we want to bring the children in, and we brought Trey in, as Dana just explained. He is a beautiful designer that meets that nature with the imagination of children and the imagination of even adults. We want adults and seniors to go out there and play. So some of the elements that you'll hear a little bit more about on Thursday, so please come out, are we're going to have some tree houses. We're going to have streams. We're going to have things that bring out your auditory skills and not only your visual. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
And ultimately, this Arboretum someday hopes to have a auditorium of some kind, right? A kind of amphitheater setting?
Yes. He does have an amphitheater. So the land at one point was a mine. So what's really interesting about the history of it is that it has all these areas that just told us what it should be. And when we walked the Arboretum, he saw this big bowl that is currently one of our fire pits just behind our pollinator garden. He said that will make for a beautiful amphitheater one day. And so that's one of the elements in the master plan. And he will be talking about some of the other things like an event center, a visitor center, and some of the other gardens as well.
All right. Well, the event, it's called Seeding Jacksonville. It is this Thursday at WJCT Studios, and I think people can get information and tickets at jacksonvillearboretum.org.
That's correct.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. Lindsay, Dana, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have questions or comments, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show's produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. Jamie Volley is our associate producer, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we turn the tables on Florida Roundup host.
More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Riverside Avondale Preservation presents the 51st Annual Home Tour on April 12th and 13th, featuring 12 properties and 9 architectural styles in support of preserving historic Jacksonville.